fixing dinner.
You're one.
We're cooking dinner. How is everybody doing?
Doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to y'all. I want to listen to this over and over and over.
Yeah.
I wish everybody would know this.
Hey, Adrian. We get to see those big dimples.
Hey,
Judson.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing great.
Good evening, everyone else.
Good evening.
Hi, everyone. Can y'all see that?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Hi, Mr. Etienne.
Hello.
We will start around 7.
Was that Judge?
Yes, sir. Judge Davis.
How you doing, Judge Davis?
Doing great. Thank you. Excited to see this again.
Yeah.
I know. It was such a good awesome presentation.
Mm-hmm. And every time you see something, you learn something again.
Right.
Like every time you see more and you see more. So it's good. You can see my background.
More and more people need to know about this.
Yeah, and you pick up every time you see a presentation, you hear something you didn't hear before.
Mr. Adrian, I have a question for you.
We will begin in about a minute. So if everyone...
They're starting in a minute.
Can y'all...
My meeting. Perfect.
Can y'all all mute your...
Nobody responded, so it's hard to know. Fer, do you want this on top? Your person.
You want to do a phone call?
Good evening, everyone. It's right at 7 o'clock. I will begin shortly. Thank all of you for joining us this evening for the Encore presentation of Civics 201. I heard several of you saying that y'all wanted to do it again, so here we go. And then for those people who did not get a chance to do it the first time, this is being streamed live on Facebook so that an additional audience can get it. I see more people jumping in, so please drop questions into the chat and I will try to break it up to pick up those questions from Eric or we'll do live Q&A also at some point. So again, everyone welcome. It's just after 7, so let's go ahead and begin. Thank you all again for joining us for Civics 201. So this is, I guess, our first evening extra of 2021. We did not have one, I don't think, in 2020. We had plans for, but we didn't get to any. So for those of you who don't know, I'm the president of the Southwest Democrats. I'm Adrian Ozuna. This is an evening extra, which means this is not a business meeting. So we will get straight into the presentation. So Civics 201 is something that we do on on odd number years. This is 2021, and the last time we did it was 2019. We do Civics 101 in the even number years so that we can get an overview of what the election process is going to look like and all of the functions that happen in a party along the way, like conventions and precincts and like true basic stuff. But along the way, we discovered, 201 was necessary because, as the tagline says, so you won an election, now what? So we will deal with the legislative overview and an executive overview. So let's start. Governing doesn't just happen. We are all people, and people have our own personalities. We have our likes and our dislikes. We have our regional preferences. We have all kinds of things that make us who we are. So the thing that I always like to go back to at the very basic part of governing is you have to respect the fact that there's a lot of different people, and because of that, those interactions become very personal with how certain things happen. So for the first point, it is local interests tend to get favor. When someone is newly elected, they are going to listen to the people who actually voted for them in their district. So if you have, a congressional district, the person who is representing that district is going to listen to someone who lives in that district more than they will necessarily pay attention to someone who lives outside that district, simply because that person actually votes for them. So that's, part one. And it works with state reps also. My state rep is Gene Wu. If I need something, he will listen to me, but we're lucky that, he listens to people across the region. But I've heard from other state reps where they pretty much only really want to hear from people who they represent. The second part is money can talk a lot. There are federal limits on raising money, but there are not as many inhibitions and prohibitions when it comes to state and local. The third thing to keep in mind in all of this is your elected official is going to ask, what's in it for me? When you're asking for something, sorry about that. The what's in it for me is, they will be very, please be sure to explain your position and why it matters that they also get on board. Popular things, tend to, oh yeah, that's great, sure, you have my support. But then you also have the flip side is you want what? There are always issues that it takes a while for those issues to percolate to where they become well-known in popular political circles or things like that. So there's always that issue. And then the final thing is doing the right thing can cost you. I bring this up a lot. In my lifetime, a Democratic president has asked Congress twice to make very difficult votes. In 1994, it was the assault weapons ban that President Clinton asked that Democratic Congress to make. And then President Obama, with 2010 with the Affordable Care Act. So extremely difficult votes. Not necessarily, in some cases they were popular, but at the same time, it was politically difficult to make them, and it costs many representatives and senators their seats in 1994 and the 2010 midterms. So that's the background of how the people interactions, what's popular, what's not popular. There's money issues. And when you're talking to them and asking them for something, you have to explain what it is. So let's talk about basics of lawmaking. So they're going to Congress. And the basic part of Congress is divided into two houses, the House and the Senate. The House is up every 2 years, all 435 members. It is headed by the Speaker of the House, who currently is Nancy Pelosi. That is a constitutional office. The Senate is made up of 100 members currently. There are 50 states, and each state gets 2 senators. Now, in the House, they approve all spending bills. Revenue bills must originate in the House, and it's very important to remember. In the Senate, they approve all appointments, and they must approve treaties by 2/3 majority. And I don't think there's been a treaty in a number of years that's been submitted for approval. The head of the Senate is the Vice President, who is Kamala Harris, and the President pro tempore, which is Patrick Leahy of Vermont. Those are constitutional offices. So that's just the basics of the House is up every 2 years. It is a non-continuous body. The Senate is a continuous body that has been in existence basically since 1789. So then here's the basics of the structure in the House and the Senate. That's without the personnel. So let's go ahead and, who's there? The Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. Steny Hoyer is the majority leader. The majority whip is Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. The House does have also currently an assistant speaker who is Catherine Clark of Massachusetts. And then the caucus chair for the Democrats is Hakeem Jeffries. If you'll note there, the reason why I have caucus conference is it in Congress for some reason, it is the Democratic caucus and the Republican conference. It's just how they organize, how they refer to themselves. And then, so on the Senate side, it is Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Majority Whip Dick Durbin, and the caucus chair is Patty Murray of Washington. So those are some of the basics of how it's currently structured in the party in both houses. So how a bill processes itself. So if you submit a bill, it goes to the Rules Committee, and then the Rules Committee sends it to an assigned committee. The Rules Committee is very important, and that's the following slide. It is where a lot of the things are established, the rules, the amount of debate time, and certain other stipulations are done. So the Rules Committee will assign a bill, your bill, say our bill. The bill that we're going to submit today is ice cream on Fridays, on closest Friday to the 4th of July. So Rules Committee will assign it someplace. Does a subcommittee need to get there? And today's a really good day to talk about committees, because if you didn't hear, the QAnon lady from Georgia just got stripped of her committee assignments. And committee assignments in the House and in the Senate is where the actual real work of legislation happens. The full body votes up or down. It is in the committees where you actually get to ask and build legislation. And true legislation is actually done in the subcommittees, and it just rolls up to the committee. So your subcommittees will, for education, we want to do X, Y, Z at public level or Head Start or one of those things. So that's where the real nitty gritty. So if you are not in a committee, you aren't really effective at doing anything. So a subcommittee will write their legislation. It goes up to the full committee for its yes or no, and they say yes. Then it goes to the full House, and the full House can say yes or no, and then it goes to the Senate, goes through whatever it wants to do, and then it goes, whether it's approved by both houses, and then it'll go to the president's desk. But one of the most important things, remember the very beginning was people are people. There's all kinds of interactions that happen and occur, and we all have our personalities. But if there's one thing that we've seen, or we should have paid attention to over the last 2 years, and before that, is the power of the chair. When you hold the gavel, you pretty much make the rules. And if you've paid attention to what's been going on in the Senate, and we can cover that in a little more detail later, without the gavels, even though the Democrats were in the majority, they couldn't get certain things done in the Senate, like, approving President Biden's nominations to his cabinet. So when you have the chair, you have the gavel, and you have the ability to control the agenda and to determine what legislation gets processed and where it moves. So remember that. So the Rules Committee is the one place where you stack the deck. Normally, it's usually divided as most committees are pretty close to how the House or the Senate is, this is specifically with the House, by the way, is divided by percentage. So if there's 55-45, then most committees would be 55-45. But in the Rules Committee, it's always a stacked deck so that the majority gets exactly what it wants out of that committee. It's usually some of the people most favored by the speaker, and it is people who really understand the process of legislation. So the Rules Committee, again, it does committee referrals. It establishes time for the debate, and it establishes whether or not a motion or a resolution is privileged. Does it get to go straight to the floor? And impeachment, since we've seen it twice in the last 2 years, is a privileged resolution. It's just a matter of what needs to be done to it to get it to the floor. Normally it goes through committees. Like the first time, it was referred through the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary established what was going on. This time, because of the importance of what had happened on the 6th of January, they wrote the article and it went from rules straight to the floor with the amount of debate established from the Rules Committee and no amendments allowed. Again, that's part of the privilege. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So the Standing Committee on Rules, and the reason I focus on this is because we have to talk a lot about process and why things take so long and how things happen, and just legislation has been described as making sausage. No one wants to see it. You just want the end product. Well, this is part of the very beginning of the grinding, is getting something into rules and what rules decides to do with it. And there are 4 parts of what the Rules Committee can do to something. There's something called an open rule, a modified open rule, a structured rule, and a closed rule. Now, the first 2 have asterisks there because they haven't been used anytime since 2014 for an open rule. I think 2015 or so for a modified open rule. Basically, an open rule allows something that gets to the floor to basically be a free-for-all. And a good example is, say, I didn't swear us in, but I'll swear us in a minute, where we're all the committee of the whole and we're participate in Congress. But we have a good friend who sits in Congress with us, and his name's Ted Cruz. And he is just, no one likes him, but he's annoying. And so somehow a promise was made that his bill, we're going to allow it to get to the floor. Now, what did I just tell you about the Rules Committee? The Rules Committee, I'll just say I'm acting as speaker. The Rules Committee is stacked with some of my best friends who know the process. So without saying anything overt, just tell the chair of the Rules Committee, bring it to the floor, but make sure it just, let everyone have at it. So you would bring a bill to the floor under an open rule, which means it's the only thing that's going to happen is a free-for-all when it comes to amendments. It's going to be amended and amended and amended, and to the point to where what originally may have started as, National Hot Dog Day ends up being, the sky is green. You can do that with an open rule. A modified rule means that it would probably have to, amendments would have to be submitted in writing. Whereas if it's just open, you can submit a rule from the floor and it can be as crazy as it wants to be. So in that vein, a structured rule would be the Rules Committee says amendments will be allowed, but they have to be in writing. And a closed rule is there will be no amendments allowed unless they have already been agreed to upon in the Rules Committee, which is why when it goes through committee, it gets to rules, at that point, every amendment that is supposed to be part of it has already been placed on there. So that's the closed rule, and that's how that all works. And which is why when you get put on rules, you usually don't sit on any other committees. And here are the House committees. There are a bunch of them because remember, there are 435 members of Congress, and they all at least sit on one committee, unless your name is Mark Green, in case you don't sit on any committees anymore. So it's agriculture, appropriations, armed services, budget, education and labor, energy and commerce, ethics. And the reason there's an asterisk on ethics is because that committee is evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats. It is a 50-50 one in order to at least give the illusion of fairness. Usually it just means that it's paralyzed and nothing's going to get paralyzed, nothing's going to get out of there. Financial services, foreign affairs, homeland security, House administration, judiciary, natural resources, oversight and reform, rules, science, space and technology, small business, transportation and infrastructure, veterans affairs, ways and means, which Ways and Means is the oldest committee that Congress created. It is the taxation committee. And this is specific again to the House. They originate revenue bills. The Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Adam Schiff, Select Committee on Climate Crisis, the Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth, the Select Committee on Modernization of Congress, Joint Select Committee on the Solvency of Multi-Employer Pensions, Joint Economic Committee, Joint Committee on Printing, and Joint Committee on Taxation. Oh. So those are a lot of those committees. So I want to back this out real quick because we're going to get to reconciliation in a moment, and then I'll walk you through this. But just keep in mind, all of these different things, all these different committees you have just seen. So that's on the House side. On the Senate side, there's fewer because, again, there's only 100 members, so they combine a lot of different things. Agriculture, nutrition, and forestry, appropriations, banking, housing, and urban affairs, budget, commerce, science, and transportation, environment and natural resources, energy and natural resources, environment and public works, finance, foreign relations, health, education, labor, and pensions, homeland security and governmental affairs, Indian affairs, Joint Committee on Printing, Joint Committee on Taxation, Joint Committee on the Library, Joint Economic Committee, the Judiciary, which did finally switch over, so I'll get to that later. Rules and Administration. The rules in the Senate are much different than the rules in the House. They don't have nearly as much power. The Select Committee on Ethics, again, it's evenly divided. Though, if you go to senate.gov and go to the committees, all of them, because of the organizing resolution and because it is a 50-50 Senate, are exactly divided 50-50 for the membership. The Democrats will hold the gavels, and the majority leader has the ability to bring a deadlocked bill out of committee to the floor for a vote. The Select Committee on Intelligence, the Small Business and Entrepreneurship, the Special Committee on Aging, and Veterans Affairs. So those are the Senate committees. We just covered the House committees. So going all the way back to the other one, a bill goes to the president to be signed in law, or he vetoes it, and then it's entered in the Federal Register, which is important because that actually says you made a law. Congratulations, a bill became a law. Do we all remember that one? I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. I'm not singing, so. So here are the special processes. Whew. The budget process. So reconciliation is being considered right now when it comes to getting the COVID relief bill through Congress. There are very specific things that have to happen for that to occur. The Senate yesterday just passed their joint resolution on the budget in order to pave the way for things to happen. The House, I think, is voting next week on their joint resolution on the budget in order to put things in motion for them. So what happens is the budget says we are going to spend $8 trillion in the fiscal year. I don't know if that's right or not, but it sounds about right, 8 trillion. Inside that 8 trillion, we expect to spend 1.9 trillion on COVID relief. And inside that will be a bunch of other things that will percolate up from all those committees. So all those other committees have work to do in order to get their piece to appropriations. So appropriations can say, yes, we agree to put X dollars in that to get to a massive budget bill in reconciliation through both houses. Was that clear as mud? So that's what is happening right now. All these different little committees and subcommittees are working right now inside a budget framework to put together that $1.9 trillion package, which has to meet very specific things in order for it to actually get through the Senate as part of a reconciliation thing. As it says there, it can be fiscal, it cannot be a policy measure. It has to have a budgetary imprint, and there are multiple little things that have to happen in order for it to meet those stipulations, which is a ruling from a parliamentarian, and it's a whole bunch of junk, but that's how it works. So let's take a little step back though, because I forgot to mention something at the very beginning of People Are People.
London might be central.
They are bringing back earmarks. And the reason why I'm very happy with this is because if you're old enough and paid attention in 1994 with the great, we're spending too much money and conservatives took over and they thought it was just a horrible thing. So they decided to say no more earmarks. And what earmarks were, if you heard the term horse trading, it was say, I would like to get a hospital built in a specific place in my district, and I need $50 million to do that. So I'm going to ask somebody to help me get $50 million specifically earmarked to get that built. And so I have to actually talk to other members of the Congress to see that my project gets done. And so by having those earmarks in there, it actually increases comedy, where they actually have to work across lines so that Dan Crenshaw actually has to talk to another member of the Houston delegation in Harris County to actually get something done for his district, because he is in the minority. And if he does want something, he needs to talk to the majority members or other members in Texas want to get something specific for Texas. They actually have to talk to each other to work to get a specific funding done for Texas. They had the best of intentions. Well, we think they had the best of intentions to get the budget processes in the 90s under control. But one of the things that happened was it actually reduced the amount of talking and interaction that was happening across party lines, because there was no, those interactions that were necessary to get things done, because they were no longer earmarked, were no longer getting done. So that's one thing. The appropriations process, again, reconciliation, its own thing, but inside that $8 trillion budget, you still have $6 trillion you have to spend. So an appropriations bill is usually done by omnibus at some point. It's usually, I think it was 13 bills, spending bills that all got scrunched up together, put into one big package according to rules, and then sent as one. So that way the possibility of it getting defeated was minimized. But let's also remember what I said about revenue bills have to originate in the House. So we all know Mitch McConnell, y'all can boo. I'm internally booing. Say that the House originates and he was majority leader. He's no longer majority leader, so he can't do this now. But say the House had this nice little $3 billion bill that they came out with, and it had the specific piece in there that said, here's $3 billion, a piece of revenue, and it goes to the Senate. Well, that $3 billion piece, he's like, oh, it's got money in it. Strip everything off of there. Just whatever, you know, like it's like a melon, scoop it out. All that's left is the funding package. put his own goodies in, and he can then pass that as having a revenue bill having originated in the House, but it's got his stuff in it instead, which of course will anger the House because that was not what he wanted, what they wanted. It's what he wanted. We can't do that now because he no longer controls a gavel or the floor. So yay. Continuing resolution is another part of the process. That usually happens when there's divided government. It's just a matter of, like in the Clinton years, it was like, we'll spend exactly what we're spending minus 3%. So all of the agencies were told, cut your budget by 3%. Or that's something Ted Cruz does. It's like, because he is what he is. But continuing resolution is simply a matter of doing what we did. And then, and continuing resolution can be as little as a week. Oh, we might get a budget bill done. A month, and we'll get to it. Or it could be, we're not even gonna try, so let's just push this out 9 months and we'll deal with it at 9 months. So that's the possibility also. And then there's privileged, how does it go to the floor directly, et cetera. Rebecca asked, the majority gets to hold the gavel. It's pretty much the basic of it. The Democrats are in the majority in the House and in the Senate, so they currently hold the gavels in all those committees. And they currently hold the ability to bring stuff to the floor. So that's what governs that. So then there's the Senate, requires unanimous consent to run. That's why when y'all heard about the lynching bill that 99 senators wanted to do, but that jerk Rand Paul was like, nope, not gonna let it happen. That's what that was about. 60 votes required for cloture. That's the filibuster issue that has been coming up. If you heard in the news, it is written to where it requires 3/5 of the total Senate, as opposed to 3/5 of the Senate as currently constituted. No, sorry, it's 3/5 of the Senate as currently constituted means 100, so it means 60 votes, as opposed to 3/5 of the senators present, which means if there were 51 senators available, you'd need 32 to get something done. And the reason I bring up 51 is because of a quorum. Blue slips with an asterisk used to be used in the judicial process. There was an article today that was talking about whether or not they're going to bring judicial blue slips. That was basically whether a senator from a state could say, I don't want that judge in my state, so no. Mitch McConnell, in filling the judiciary with all kinds of unqualified judges on behalf, thanks to the Trump administration, got rid of the process so they could just shove unqualified people all across the country. Again, treaties require 2/3 approval. And again, they cannot generate a revenue, cannot originate a revenue bill, but there's ways around that. Any questions? So I forgot this the last time we did this. It somehow slipped through, but there's one other function that Congress has that's very important, oversight. And if y'all remember, oversight was simply a passing fancy when the Republicans were in charge of looking over Trump's shoulder. They're like, well, I don't see anything that's going wrong. And then the Trump administration pretty much ignored the House and told them to, you know, go jump in a river. But they are supposed to review administration actions. I think it was either Axios or Politico that had it, because they were asking, because Dick Durbin is now the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and they were talking about whether or not he was going to bring back blue slips. And it was about circuit court, the circuits, as opposed to the district courts. And then they're supposed to review administration actions. be able to question administration officials about policy. Remember, a number of Trump administration officials refused at some point to go when the House summoned them. That's why I put supposed. One of the things I'm really hoping is that the Biden administration will return to oversight to where they will actually heed when Congress wants. And it's friendly right now. The Democrats are there, but something like, say, child separation, they really need to bring in those people who are responsible directly for those programs right now. Even though Alejandro Mayorkas is just came in as secretary, I think this week, the House and the Senate need to begin true investigations into everything that has gone on and what the Biden administration plans to do to fix it. Just because it's Democrats doesn't mean that the House or the Senate should give up any level of oversight when it comes to making sure that policies are followed or that laws are administered the way they wish them to do. And the other part is the review of spending items and directives. When Congress allocates funds, say $40 billion to natural disaster funding, say for fires here, there, and everywhere, they can then ask to make sure that FEMA has actually allocated those funds, like Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. It's been 1,000 days or so since that hit, and the Trump administration refused to spend the funds allocated for that relief. The Biden administration has released those funds finally, so they're getting there, but Congress still needs to assert its authority and prerogatives to make sure that those things are happening again. Normality shouldn't just be because it's in the same party. Oversight should always be occurring because that's one of Congress's prerogatives. They paid the bill. They now need to make sure that the money was spent as they wished it. What was that? Hold on.
Adrian, we have several questions.
Okay.
Jenny Allen here. There's 2 questions in the chat about consent to run.
Yes.
Can you explain unanimous consent to run?
Unanimous consent to run is basically, like I gave the example, it requires the Senate, when it's not in session or there's only a few people, just listen by unanimous consent and they will proceed with a item. The reason why that lynching bill never came to a vote for the floor is they did not have unanimous consent. Rand Paul objected to bringing that to the floor. So one senator refused to allow that to happen, even though there were going to be 70 or so yay votes. So it never made it to the floor. So it requires a single senator has the ability to hold up legislation unless it has specific prerogatives like reconciliation. That is not a filibuster. It is unable to be filibustered. It is unable to be hindered in that way. There are very specific mechanisms for that kind of bill. But because the lynching bill was not a funding bill, it did not have those protections.
Thank you.
What is about holding up appointments? Okay, remember the organizing resolution I was talking about where it just flipped to 50-50? And hold on, let me get to that in a moment. So that's oversight, we should return to that. So to get to the next point, originally when we did this 2 years ago, the administration was in the Republican hands, but because this happened, congratulations to Democrats, it is now the Biden-Harris administration, and they now hold the White House. Yay! They now have control of the administrative branch of government, Article 2, the Democrats. And as such, inside of that, you elect Joe Biden, you have Kamala Harris, he's the president. Inside of that makes up what's called the executive office of the president. All the different branches at the White House, which help him run the government. So there is the Council of Economic Advisors, the Council on Environmental Quality, the Domestic Policy Council, the National Economic Council, the National Security Council, the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, Office of Management and Budget, the Office of National Drug Policy Control Policy, Office of Public Engagement, and the Office of Science and Technology. So all those different things make up the executive office to help run policy out of commonly referred to as the West Wing. So that all those executive actions and things like that, they're usually coming up through one of these channels. And in addition to that is the cabinet. So Kamala Harris as vice president is part of the cabinet. And then the asterisks here indicate someone who has been confirmed by the Senate. So you have Anthony Blinken, and that's misspelled, it's Antony, sorry. Blinken at State, Dr. Janet Yellen at Treasury, and General Lloyd Austin at Defense. All three have been confirmed and are in their positions. Merrick Garland at Justice, and this is the perfect point to go back to the other one where it was holding up appointments. Because the organizing resolution was not approved until yesterday, technically all of the committees were still in Republican hands, even though the Democrats were in the majority. So the holdup is, oh, thank you. The holdup is Lindsey Graham refused to bring Judge Garland's appointment to the committee. So there was no hearing yet. And as such, now that Dick Durbin holds the gavel in judiciary, Merrick Garland can now get his hearing so that it can then proceed to the floor for his approval to run justice, to become the Attorney General. So that is the basic, the process right now of what's holding up several of these people. So Merrick Garland is to be Attorney General. Congresswoman Deb Haaland of New Mexico is to be Interior. Tom Vilsack is the former Agriculture Secretary under President Obama. He has been renominated. Governor Gina Raimondo, she just got hers, I think it was 21-3 out of her committee, but I don't think it's gone to the full Senate yet for approval. Marty Walsh at Labor, he's the mayor of Boston, I think. Javier Becerra is the Attorney General of California to become Health and Human Services. Congresswoman Martha Fudge, in the chat, someone said she was just approved, so she gets an asterisk finally. Secretary Pete Buttigieg is now Transportation Secretary, no longer Mayor Pete, but now Secretary Pete. Former Governor Jennifer Granholm has been nominated for Energy. I'll get to that in one moment, Rebecca. Education is Dr. Miguel Cardona. Veterans Affairs, Dennis McDonough. Alejandro Mayorkas was sworn in yesterday, I think, for Homeland Security. EPA is Michael Regan. OMB, Office of Management and Budget, is Neera Tanden. I think her schedule is next week. Avril Haines is the Director of National Intelligence. She was the only one approved. She was the first one approved. Catherine Tay is the United States Trade Representative. The United Nations Ambassador is Linda Thomas Greenfield. The Council of Economic Advisors is Dr. Cecilia Rouse. Small Business Administration is Isabel Guzman. Office of Science and Technology is Dr. Eric Lander. And Ron Klain, who is the Chief of Staff, is considered a member of the cabinet. And he holds control to the White House. So, okay, so let's get through here. The reason why the R's were still in charge, technically, so I threw in a little blurb about the Senate being a continuing body since 1789. So as it's a continuing body, because again, because only 1/3 of the Senate is up every cycle, so 33, 33, 34. So as a result of that, technically when a election happens, a senator's term ends on January 2nd. So they have to be re-sworn in, and then as a matter of the organizing resolution, placed back on their committees. So technically, between the 2nd and yesterday, the people who just got elected or reelected didn't have a committee assignment. So as such, all the committees were technically missing part of their members or hadn't been assigned new members yet. And as a result, also, even though some of the committees may have had 9 Democrats and 4 Republicans, the Republicans, because that organizing resolution had not formally transferred power from the Democrats to the Republicans, the Republican had the gavel. So that's how that whole mess was going. So probably clear as mud, but until that organizing resolution officially put, say, John Ossoff, Raphael Warnock, Padilla from California into their committees, and all the ones who just got elected, like Mark Kelly, the committees didn't get reshuffled to where it was now the Democrats have the gavel. So that's how that didn't go through. Okay, yay. Linda Thomas Greenfield was just approved out of Foreign Affairs. Hawley did hold up Mayorkas, but finally, basically he was like, I have very strong opinions on why Mayorkas and Garland have been held up. I think it has a lot to do with justice and what happened on the 6th, but that's conjecture, so leave that aside. Hawley didn't put a true hold. He just said it was not a fast track nomination. He did finally go through a full hearing for Homeland Security, got voted out of there, and then got voted out of the Senate earlier this week. But I think only 3 Republicans or 4 Republicans backed him. It was like 56-40, something like that. It was not a majority backed him, but it wasn't something like, say, Blinken, who I think only had 9 vote against him. Hawley is one of those senators right now who is voting against every single appointment from the Biden administration. No, only the senators who are sworn in are only the ones who just got elected or reelected. Otherwise, you're still a sitting senator because you serve a 6-year term, as opposed to the House, which every 2 years all get resworn in, and at that point they all again have to vote for the speaker. That's the difference between a continuing body and a body that reforms itself every 2 years. And there's always a specific rules package that is adopted at that point as well. Whereas the Senate rules have been technically in existence since 1789. They rewrite them and such, but that's how that goes. Okay. So that's the cabinet and the executive office of the president. And as we've seen in this last 2.5 weeks, yeah, because it's 16 days, I think, today since President Biden was sworn in. Federal directives, executive orders, it orders the federal government to do X, Y, or Z, enhance legislation, order agencies to implement congressional laws. Congress has a really bad habit of writing a law, and they'll spell out part of it, but then they leave it to the administration to actually, so they're writing a policy, and then they tell the administration, well, you figure out the procedure for how to actually get it done and implemented. It happens a lot. And so administration are like, okay, like the Domestic Policy Council, which Susan Rice is in charge of, probably gets certain things like marching orders. Okay, you need to figure out how to implement X, Y, or Z. So that happens. Disaster declarations are extremely important because it waives a number of regulations and also allows for the movement of monies and resources very quickly to those areas that are impacted normally. Again, we saw with Hurricane Maria and Puerto Rico how much damage not moving can do to things, to areas, to people. And then there's the pardons part, which we've seen the pardons. It's a mostly unlimited power. We'll see what happens in the future. So that's pretty much the executive in a quick overview. Supreme Court building, I'm not touching the judiciary. You got Supreme Court, circuit courts, district courts, then you have the state system. So yeah, I'm not, it exists, it's Article 3. Texas, woohoo! It's in red, unfortunately, but I did that on purpose. So the state legislature, session for a state as big as we are, it is in session for only 140 days every 2 years. There are 150 members in the House and 31 in the Senate. The governor has the power to call a special session limited to specific areas. In other words, like the bathroom bill, like let's have a special session about that, but let's not have a special session about COVID or Hurricane Harvey. You know, his priorities are warped, to say the least. Sessions can be brutal. Otis, who is John Rosenthal's chief of staff, asked me to reiterate that the last time. It is basically who can survive to the finish line with their mental capacity most intact. Because as you know right now, they may technically be in session, but they're not doing anything yet. They will begin in March, from what I understand, to actually begin doing hearings and moving bills and the budget process and all that. So, and then finally, Sine Die is, you know, sometimes the best move is no move. Attrition, let's just hold off and fight as long as we can and kill a bill by not letting it move. So there is that. There are a number of House committees. Calendars is kind of like rules at the federal level. Calendars controls what gets to the floor. So that's really, really important. There are a few other ones. Ways and Means, the budget. It's not here, hold on, we have Agriculture and Livestock, Appropriations, that's the one, to actually establish where stuff is, the funding is going to be put. Business and Industry, Calendars, Corrections, County Affairs, Criminal Jurisprudence, Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, Defense and Veterans Affairs, Elections. I don't know if y'all knew this, but Briscoe Kane has been named chair of Elections. Energy Resources, Environmental Regulation, General Investigating, Higher Education, Homeland Security and Public Safety, House Administration, Human Services, Insurance, International Relations and Economic Development, Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence, Juvenile Justice and Family. There's a number of different legal areas that get split up. Like you'll see civil jurisprudence, criminal jurisprudence, juvenile justice and family affairs. Those are all been separated out. Land and resource management, licensing and administrative procedure, local and consent calendars, natural resources, pensions and investments in financial services, public education, public health, redistricting, resolutions calendars, state affairs, transportation, urban affairs, and Ways and Means. So those are the House committees. When we post this to the website, you'll be able to see these. I took this from the Texas Legislative Council. These are the processes by which stuff gets moved through the House to become, originating in the House to become law and originating in the Senate to become law. As you can see, it does the pipeline situation. So we are going to post this on the website, and at that you can see them much more clearly. And then moving towards the Senate side, the Senate is headed by the Lieutenant Governor of the state, who should remain nameless, appoints committee chairs, assigns bills to committees, leads the budget process, and controls part of redistricting, which not looking forward to that. And the Senate committees are administration, business and commerce, committee of the whole, the committee of the whole Senate, criminal justice, education, finance, health and human services, higher education, jurisprudence. They kind of packed that all together instead of what they did with the House. Again, more members, fewer members. Local government, natural resources and economic development, nominations, ports, select ports, redistricting, state affairs, transportation, veterans affairs and border security, and water, agriculture, and rural affairs. Interesting that they combine those that way. So that's just a quick overview on that. So Democrats aren't going to have a lot of say in redistricting, and that's probably the biggest battle that's coming up, and it's going to be a special session since the census data won't be released, I heard, until the summer. So this is Harris County congressional layout as it is now. It's going to change because the census, the way the population grew in Harris County and Fort Bend County, parts of Montgomery and Brazoria, the Houston area is almost guaranteed another congressional member. The I-35 corridor between San Antonio and Austin is almost guaranteed another representative. And then the Dallas-Fort Worth region is almost guaranteed another member, because Texas was looking at 3. Well, part of that also means that all the lines have to shift because to match equal population. So that's part 1 for the congressional level. And then on the state level, and this is Southwest Houston, the red lines are the Senate district, and then the colored areas are the state representative districts. Because of Fort Bend County's growth, Fort Bend County is almost guaranteed another state rep. And Houston, I mean, Harris County they may get another rep, may not, but quite possibly, I think someone said that Harris County was probably going to get one because of the growth. But there's only 150 members of the Texas House. So when an area is gaining, like Texas is gaining 3 seats, I think New York's losing 1, I think Pennsylvania's losing 1, I think Ohio's losing 1. Florida gets 2 seats. It gets reshuffled. So low population losing areas lose a representative, population growth areas gain a representative. Well, in Texas, this is where the biggest fight's going to become, because you have the urban areas and the suburban areas continuing to grow at enormous rates, getting representatives, and the rural areas losing population. So they're going to lose. So in order for the Republicans to maintain power, they are going to draw some of the wackiest, craziest line. And we've seen some crazy lines in Texas. I mean, Dan Crenshaw's is the loopiest thing there is. And that's at that level. It will be very interesting when the special session rolls around to how this is going to happen in Harris County and Fort Bend County. So the last thing that's really, to really hammer home, talked about process. We've talked about the importance of how the process works. We've talked about how different things, the messiness of it all. But one of the key things that needs to be reiterated is Republicans are always in the ear of their representatives, always, constantly telling them, you know, Fox News told me this, Fox News told me that, you know, don't let them do this, that, and the other. Unfortunately, Democrats were like, we won the election. Okay, I'm gonna go have a picnic. We need to lobby our representatives at the federal and state levels just as much as they do, because then we get things done, or at least we give them the ability to continue to fight. You know, Boris Miles, the state senator from Senate District 13, told us he wants to hear from us. Jean Wu said, you know, 136 wants to hear from us. We need to, you know, Ann Johnson, she's a freshman member of the state ledge. The more encouragement they get to fight for certain things, they get to tell other people, look, my constituents want us to do this. My constituents really want us to do. It gives them the ability to say, I've got people back home who are supporting me to make sure that we are achieving certain things. So we need to be just as we need to be as thorough as the other side is. when it comes to making sure that our representatives are trying to do the right thing. So those are links in there. The House.gov, Senate.gov, they have links to the offices and the phone numbers of the Capitol. The Whitehouse.gov, there's a White House that actually listens to Democrats and most people now. And then there's the ones, the state Senate, the state House, and the governor. There is also mechanisms on there to track bills so that you can actually follow what's going on inside the legislature. Okay, questions? Questions? Oh, the Southwest Democrats are now part of the Blue Action Democrats. So put that there. Yes, thank you, Judge Landau. Yes, be on the lookout for judicial redistricting and courts of appeal. Yes. Okay, what was that? Who determines if it is? Who determines if the I think that's state law, but I could be. I'll look it up. I do believe that legislative committees will be live streamed. However, I did hear, I was on a meeting Tuesday, and I heard that some committees in the House were told that they will accept in-person testimony, but they would not take remote testimony, which is a bunch of BS because we're in the middle of a pandemic. You know, yes, we're getting vaccinated, but you know, you still don't want people around other people to any big extent. So, but I think they are live streaming. They'll live stream the live testimony, but they're not taking remote testimony, which, the presentation is being recorded, so it should be available on our YouTube channel at some point. I'm not going to commit to tonight, but it should be available. The Blue Action Democrats is simply more resources. There are chapters in the Hill Country. It was founded out of Austin. There's, I think, 3 there. One in San Antonio and 2 in Fort Worth. And basically, it is basically trying to align they gave us additional resources to expanded access to text messaging and some other stuff. But basically, it's also about trying to build a network to where we're working on the same page. What was that? A stronger focus on organizing is part of that. Any other questions? Thank you all so much for the, yes, it's grassroots, Gail. Part of the focus is to focus specifically on the grassroots to make sure that people stay engaged. It is a level of continued engagement and education. It's something that we were already involved in, and it's just a matter of reinforcing, you know, good behavior. Each club currently, Angela, each club I think is currently funding ourselves. There are funding mechanisms in there. Eric, can you drop a YouTube link? Yeah, someone's asking for. There are other presentations there, but I will try to get this one on there shortly. Are there any other questions? Just to sum up, you know, we've seen a lot of, we live in interesting times, which is not necessarily a good thing in one way. The reason why it's considered a curse in some cultures. But one of the things I think that we've been forced to pay attention to these processes more and more, to actually understand how legislation and administration works, and to actually become intimately involved in how our government functions, and to also understand how many of the guardrails are not nearly as strong as we thought. And so we need to be vigilant. We need to be aware of all the different things that are happening. It is good for the most part that the Democrats have control in the Senate and the House. There's a number of things that they're working on. It is, good that there's a Democratic administration, so that at least they're attempting to do good things. But we as constituents, we as Americans, we as voters need to be on top of them to make sure they are not doing things that we do not agree with, or that they are not doing things that do not help most people. So that's part of this whole thing of why we do the civics, why we do this education, so that we know how things happen, why things take time. All those committee processes, it's a mess, it's ugly. It's going to take a little bit of time to get all that stuff to reconciliation. There's things happening in the Senate. People are going to go, what is going on? Just remember, there's a number of processes that happen that are built into the rules and how things happen. So, it is what it is. Are there any other questions? Thank y'all so very much. This is the stuff I really like to do. This is the fun part to me. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Just a little over an hour. My voice is probably going to go out in a moment. So thank you all very much. I will talk to you all soon. Have a wonderful evening.
Great job, Adrienne.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.